There, there are a couple things about these tanks. Not just, obviously it's a tank. What does a tank do, right? It just holds liquid around a cardo. So for that reason, they can seem to be a bit expensive. I'm an over-the-road trucker, folks, and here's the thing about being an over-the-road trucker. Cardo tanks obviously have the liquid in the tank and then some air up above them, and it uses the air pressure to push the liquid through the little hole in the cardomizer so that you keep your cardomizer wet and you're constantly having a good vape, right? The problem is the air pressure inside of the cardo. Now, being an over-the-road trucker, you know, you go over different elevations. You go through Wyoming, through the mountains of Colorado, all over the country. Of course, you got the mountains. And the problem with the air pressure is I can stop in Nebraska and fill a cardo tank, one of the little $8, $10 ones you get from the vapor shops around the country. I can fill that cardo tank and I can drive to Wyoming and I can stop in Cheyenne and spend the night, right? And when I wake up, my tank will be empty. All the liquid will have pushed through that hole in the cardo and down the center pipe and run all down the side of my mod. The reason for that is when you're at a lower elevation, the air is a lot thicker and thus heavier. When you're at a higher elevation, the air is a lot thinner. So when you fill it at the lower elevation, you start to vape it and you've got that heavy air in there, and then you stop at the higher elevation with the thinner air. What happens is there's not enough air pressure outside of the tank to resist the heavier air inside the tank, and that air tries to get out, and it does so by pushing the liquid through the tank. Now, I can't explain this one because that happens with every tank I've had, with the exception of the Phiniac tank and the Big Daddy tank from, the Big Daddy tank from, the Who's Your Daddy tank from Big Daddy Vapors. There you go. People trying to confuse me. For some reason, those two tanks, and the best thing I can tell you is, these have the absolute best seals on them. The Phiniac and the Big Daddy tank have such good seals on them. They grab the tank so tight and the cardo so tight, and I don't know if that has anything to do with it. It's something that doesn't make sense to me. I can just tell you that if you're an over-the-road trucker like I am, and you're using cardomizer tanks, you need a Phiniac or a Big Daddy, because it takes care of that problem. Occasionally you'll get a small amount of leakage out the bottom still when that happens, and I'm talking like a drop, something like that. But the little plastic, and I don't have one here with me, the polycarbonate tubes with the stainless steel end caps that you can get at my vapor store, a bunch of vapor shops. They're great if you live, you know, if you don't travel much. But if you're traveling around, these tanks just flood and leak with those cheap tanks. With these from Phiniac, you don't have that problem. So it's a nice benefit. It won't apply to most of you, but it just speaks to the quality that these tanks are made with. And that's all the information most of you need to know if you're thinking about getting a Phiniac. Now, if you are going to get a Phiniac and you're going to get a glass Phiniac, and well, I think they're all glass, and you're going to get the metal end caps, there's something else you need to know. So I'm going to go ahead and show you something about putting these end caps onto the Phiniac. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get your liquid, and I have a nice bottle of the Duke from Indigo Vapor. Great liquid. And let's see if I can do this here on the camera. What you're going to want to do is just take a little bit of your liquid and put it on the seal that goes, the O-ring, as you see the O-ring there, that goes around the tank. You're going to want to just basically, let me adjust this camera so we can do this more comfortably. You're basically going to want to, well, now I'm upside down. There we go. You're basically just lubing up this O-ring around the cardomizer, or in my case getting it all over the cap so it'll leak. But you just want a small amount of liquid on there, and that's going to make it easier to slide this onto the tank, because what happens is the top part, the ridge of this cap, is basically the same size as your opening on the tank. So when you set that on there, what you always want to do is you want to go straight down with the cap. You don't want to go in at an angle, because you're going to wind up putting extra pressure on the tank and you could crack it. So once you got that liquid on there, it makes it very easy to just, boom, slide it down on there. And as you see, it went on there very easily, as opposed to a dry O-ring, which we'll try to do here. And it takes a fair amount of pressure to get the unlubed tank on there. As you can see, it's not all the way on there. Oops, here we go. It's not all the way on there. When you lube it up, it just makes it so much easier to get that tank, that cap, to go onto the tank. And this is counterintuitive if you use cardo tanks a lot, because the tanks on some of these, the caps are so loose that you almost can't get them to go on there, or to stay on there, excuse me. And so when I'm telling you to lube them, you're probably saying, why would you want to lube them? They're going to pull off easier too. In theory, they will pull off easier. I have never had a problem with one of these tanks coming off. I mean, they literally grip both the glass on the tank and the cartomizer that well that I've never had a problem keeping them on there. I've never had one slide off on me. So I go ahead and lube them up. Now, I'm not going to take the time to prime the cartomizer. I think you probably already know how to do that. But because there are inner and outer O-rings on that tank, you're going to need a tank tool to protect those O-rings. And Phiniac has one. I actually prefer the Slap Yo Mama tank tool from Big Daddy Vapors. But this is the tank tool from Phiniac, and it does a couple of things, but one of the things it does is it protects your O-rings when you slide it into the tank. If you look at that right there, you can see that the cap is slightly wider than the cartomizer. So when you slide it through there, instead of that hard metal of the cartomizer hitting the O-rings, it slides right over that tank tool, which is made out of Delrin, I believe, as well. And so it protects those O-rings from the edge of the cartomizer. But the other thing it does is once you've slid it all the way in, and you can see, I believe, yes, it's slightly above the top, it gives you that space to go ahead and fill the tank with liquid. And, you know, rather than having to hold the cartomizer down like that and trying to drop it in the side, the cartomizer's covered by the tank tool, and then you can just run your liquid straight down into there, and you can fill the tank a lot fuller and a lot better with the tank tool. So if you're going to get your Phiniac tank, go ahead and pick up one of these tank tools or one of the Slap Your Mama tank tools from Big Daddy Vapor. Let me get the camera back up here now. And go ahead and pick yourself up a tank tool too, because they're going to make your life so much easier with these cardo tanks. But that's the long and short of it. If you're brand new to cartomizer tanks, I recommend picking one up. I hate to recommend a cheapo that you're going to throw away. I recommend picking up a cheapo, making sure you like cartomizer tanks, and once you've used them and you know you like them and you decide you're wanting to get a better cartomizer tank, there's not a better one on the market than Phiniac. There just isn't. It's a work of art. It is. They're beautiful tanks, and they do the job very well. There are other tanks you can find that do the job as well as a Phiniac, but you can't find them looking as good while they do the job the Phiniac tanks do. So that's your kind of review / tutorial for Phiniac tanks. I love them. I highly recommend them. As you can tell, I've got enough of them laying around here. I use them all the time. I'm just, being an over-the-road trucker, as I mentioned, I'm driving for long periods of time. I need something that holds a lot of e-liquid that I don't have to worry about refilling. I don't have to stop or try to sit here driving down the road dripping into an atomizer. And a dual coil cartomizer tank for me is the best device available. And these large Phiniac tanks hold, I think they say 5 milliliters. I think it holds 4 milliliters of juice, and then, of course, another mill in the Cardo. So it gets me through a driving day without having to refill. And it's just what the doctor ordered for me. And as I said, you can't do better than a Phiniac tank. So anyhow, for the rest of you truckers out there, you know the deal. Keep the shiny side up, dirty side down, keep the bugs off your glass, the bears off your ass, 8s and 6s, keep it between the ditches, and we'll catch you on the flip side of SmokeyandTheBandwidth.com.